As I'm setting up for this demo, I'm going over the products that we'll actually be using in it. And this first demo is the jelly plate. And a jelly plate is a plastic gelatin plate which is meant for monoprinting. The appeal of it is that you can do numerous prints off of one jelly plate rather than having to carve into it or having a disposable plate where you only get to throw one print. It's also covered in a mineral oil, so the paints come off very easily and they do clean up very easily. I am using a golden based or a golden brand slow dry acrylic, which also allows for the paints to be able to be moved pretty easily and come off of the jelly plate really easily, and also a lot more blending and a lot more adding of paint. I really do like using the golden opens. Like I said, they dry a lot slower, so you have more time to work with these and more time to layer them without worrying about them drying up on you, as acrylic does dry very, very quickly. My favorite paper that I use with this is Bristol. Bristol is a very heavyweight paper, but it also handles wet media really well. I tend to use it with pen and ink washes, but it just works great with it. This was just going over a little bit of a process of pouring, and I was just kind of playing with the acrylics and the pouring mediums on it. This was not a cup pour, this was just a drip pour, but it shows a little bit of the differences between using spray alcohol and drip silicone, both which get an effect on the acrylic paints. The spray alcohol causing a little bit of cell division and a differentiation in texture, and then the silicone actually causes the cells to divide on the paint really, really well. So you do get these neat, cool bubbles, these different cells in the acrylic. The other thing I used with this was a dry powder by Pearl-Ex, which is just a dry pigmentation and needs a vehicle of some kind. The acrylic worked really well with this and just gave it a really pearly pop that just kind of went over and just went wherever it wanted to go. These are the pouring mediums that you use with them. You do need to use a pouring medium with your acrylics. It causes the acrylic to be much thinner. It allows you to actually pour these and drizzle these to get the effect that you're after. Water will not cut it, since it will just cut the polymer to a point where it can't bond anymore. It comes in a gloss and it comes in a flat matte finish. These are just a mixed down version where I've already put the pouring medium and the acrylic into the bottle, and then the high flow is on the right hand side. High flow is just a very thin acrylic. These two here were also some experimentation. I used a glitter medium to get just a really neat kind of chunky glitter look underneath it, and then I used the dragonfly glaze to attempt to get something of a poured glitter effect. It wasn't as successful as I was hoping it would be, mostly because it wasn't being cut by the acrylic as well. In here, I am just layering the acrylics onto the jelly plate so I can throw a print. I do like to put it on fairly thick. Again, you can do more than one print off of it, and you get just a multitude of prints that all definitely look different. You can roll the paints and the ink on, which is perfectly fine. I tend to brush them on because I'm making something of a pattern. Again, these clean off really easily since the jelly plate is covered in a mineral substance that really helps with it. And now remember, when you do coat your jelly plate, it's just like you're doing a block print. Whatever layers you're putting underneath are going to be less visible, considering that you've put paint on underneath it. So this is something that I do try and keep in mind. Sometimes I'm not as good at it as I am with other times. This kind of technique here really does well with contrasting colors, just because they really show up well. And this using of the alcohol is meant to introduce a little bit of a texture into the acrylic before I throw the print. Again, Bristol paper works really, really well on this. It picks up the acrylic really well. It doesn't bubble, it doesn't ripple. It's made for a wet media paper, for a water-based material as well as using it with pen and ink and markers. Now, as you can see, like I said before, in doing this print, I should have probably placed the yellow underneath the sky before I had placed it on there, just because it would have allowed for that color to show through more. Like I said before, if you're doing this, you're definitely doing it backwards, just like you would with a block print. But I really like using these rich, bright, deep colors in order to just get as colorful of a print as I possibly can. Another thing that's really neat with the jelly plate, which I did not have with me this day, is you can actually use stencils with it. And stenciling allows you to control the area of the paint and where it's going. And it also allows you to put different images and different types of textures and images into the print before you use it. So this was a little bit of an experiment in the pouring and in the jelly plate, was improvising and using a bit of pearl powder. It's a really highly pigmented powder that gives you a metallic sheen to anything. And like I said, it needs a vehicle of some kind, whether it's polymer or gum arabic or oil, anything like that. But it just gives a really cool, really neat pearl sheen to anything that you put it into. This is where I started playing with pouring, and this was a little bit less pouring and just playing with the mediums and seeing where they went and seeing where they go. I did enjoy being able to kind of get the acrylics to stay in a certain area and do something a little bit less traditional than a normal pouring. Playing with the shapes and the paint and the really thin viscosity of acrylic that has a pouring agent in it was really neat as well. Normally this is not the type of technique that I do with pouring, but again with the pearl powder and with using the stick to kind of drag this paint around, it was just a fun little experiment and a fun way to play with the acrylics. Now the board that I'm using this on is actually an art board. It's a masonite art board that's been primed for acrylic. It's a really good surface for something like this. The prime board can handle the acrylic really well. It's just a really good hard surface that has no flex, no bow, no give to it. So you're getting a good consistent texture and a good consistent give to the board. This is when I actually started pouring here, and I had done a handful of other pours as well, but this is the technique that is a little bit more typical and more popular in the pouring world, and this is what gives you that marbleized look that you can also get this really cool cell division and spray, or this look with the alcohol spray. And as you can see, the marbling effect is already starting to happen, and that's attained by squeezing different layers of paint into the cup. And you don't want to mix it. What you generally want to do with it, specifically want to do with it, is that you want the paints to stay on top of each other without mixing it in. And then at this point now, I'm spraying it with alcohol, and as you can see, the cells are just dividing right in front of you, and the colors are starting to separate so you can see what's underneath them. The silicone is what causes the large cell division, and it creates that really large bubble effect that you see on poured pieces. This just happens right in front of your eyes, which is pretty amazing to watch. This is just a really cool, neat art form that is definitely abstract and you don't have a lot of control over it, but I actually like that. I like watching how this is going to develop into what it does. I wanted to add some of this pearl powder in here too and get a little bit of a metallic sheen to it, kind of drag the corners out and blend in that white. One thing I'm finding as I talk to artists who pour is something that's very popular right now is pouring onto tabletops and countertops and sealing them in resin. Resin is what gives you this really smooth, really mirror-like finish where it's high gloss, and it makes the poured acrylic look even more like marble. At this point, I just wanted to get a couple blooms of color, black in this case, that were just going to be in contrast with the rest of the painting, especially because there's a lot of yellow in it. And this is something you can do. You can go back and reintroduce more color and reintroduce more paint into it. It's not going to do anything to hurt it. And then, of course, the alcohol is what's causing this black to bleed out into the existing color. I hope you enjoyed our little demo on pouring. We do actively carry every medium and paint that you'll need to use this with. Again, what I used in this demo was primarily golden products, which we do love. They're definitely one of my favorites, and like I said before, I really do like the slow dry golden. You can get all the acrylics, the silicone, the boards, and everything you might need for your pouring excursion here at Spokane Art Supply. Thanks so much for watching, you guys.